Hey, I hope you're having a great morning or a great afternoon. What a beautiful, glorious day. I am taking a little stroll out here in the snow. It's so calm, it's so serene, it's so quiet. Inside the house, of course, all the kids are home because no one had school. We had a snow day today. The kids are excited, but there ain't no place or quiet space for a Dvar Torah. But I wanted to think and talk to you about this idea about our children listening to us. The story of today's Torah portion, when God tells Moses, Boa Paro, come to Pharaoh. And he tells him, I want you to go to Pharaoh. Leman tesaper ba'oznei vincha uven vincha. Eis asher yisalalti b'Mitzrayim. I want you to go. I know Pharaoh might say no, but I need to punish him more. You know why? Because I want you for generations, for eternity, to speak into the ears of your children and your grandchildren and tell them the miracles and the greatness that God did to take them out of Egypt. And of course the question is, why does God say in order that you should speak into the ears of your children and grandchildren? When you want to speak to someone, you don't say, let me speak into your ear. You don't speak to someone's ear, you just speak to them. Obviously you want them to listen. And the answer the commentaries say is that there are two kinds of conversations you have. There's casual conversation. You're sitting in shul. It's kiddish. You're kibitzing. How are you? What's news? What did you do this week? How was work? You're chatting with your coworker at work. You're at school and you're kibitzing together. That's casual conversation. But then there's what we call meaningful conversation. Life lessons. When you speak to your children, when you're trying to set an example and you're trying to tell them things that they need to hear, that they need to internalize for their life, for their future. Says God to Moshe, Leman tesaper ba'oznei vincha. These are conversations I want you to have with your children that you need to speak into their ear. You need to speak to them that they shall listen, that they should be able to internalize. And that's been the story of our people for over 3 millennia since then. Every Shabbos, every Friday night, every holiday, of course on Passover, we sit down with our children and we speak to them. But we don't just speak to them. We speak to them in a way, Leman tesaper ba'oznei vincha. We speak to them in a way that they should hear. How do we do that? How do you have a conversation with someone and make sure that they will listen with their ears, that they will internalize it, that they will realize that it's not a conversation that's casual. You're not just kibitzing with them, but you're telling them things that are critical for them to know for their life, for their future. And the answer, of course, is, the rabbis tell us, Dvarim hayotzim min halev, nichnosim min halev. When you speak from the heart, when the words leave your heart, then they enter the other's hearts. When you want to have a meaningful conversation and you don't want it just to enter their minds, but you want it to pierce their hearts. You want them to listen and internalize this message of Judaism and godliness and spirituality. It needs to come from your heart. Only when Dvarim hayotzim min halev, when they leave your heart, when they come from the place that is meaningful and important to you, then nichnosim min halev, they can enter into the hearts of your children and your grandchildren. So when you have a snow day, you're sitting at home, all the children are home, Shabbos is coming, hopefully you'll have a delicious Shabbos dinner in a warm home, you'll make kiddush, you'll pray, you'll meditate, speak to your children, but dav leman tesaper ba'oznei vincha, speak into their ears, speak to your heart, tell them the story of our people, tell them the story of the Exodus, the story of Judaism, our history, our trials and tribulations, our ups and downs, but our perseverance and our faith throughout it all. You know, Grunie has an uncle, Rabbi Shalom Lipsker. He was the rabbi of the Shul Bal Harbor. And he once told me a very moving story that really I would feel connects to this idea in a certain sense. And he told me a story, it was years ago, before cell phones even, in the 80s. And he got sick and he was rushed to the hospital and they had to do a test on him. That was a test that wasn't yet developed properly, and it wasn't so available. And they did this test on him, and he was in the hospital. And the next morning, his wife called the phone near his bed in the room that he was in, and he didn't answer. And she kept on calling and ringing and ringing and ringing. And finally, the guy who was in the room in the bed next to him picks up the phone, and he says, "Just can I speak to my husband?" And he says, "Well, he's sleeping." He says, "What do you mean he's sleeping? I have to speak to him." And she says, the guy tells him, "There's a code blue. Your husband is in a coma. They can't wake him up. Either the test didn't work well or the anesthesia, but they can't get him up." So my aunt Chani, Grunie's aunt, runs to the hospital. She's frantic. And by the time she came, it was a cold blue. They didn't let her into the room. So what's she gonna do? She immediately calls New York. She's waiting by the nurse's station. And she calls New York to the Lubavitcher Rebbe, blessed memory, and she cries to the secretary, "Please tell the Rebbe, my husband, there's a cold blue. My husband had a test and they can't wake him up. He's in a coma. What am I to do?" She's waiting at the station. They ask her for the number. She gives them the number of the station, and a few minutes later, she gets a call back from the Rebbe's chief secretary, Rabbi Chadakov. "The Rebbe wants to speak to your husband." And she says, "What do you mean the Rebbe wants to speak to my husband? I can't even go in. He's in a coma." And the secretary says, "The Rebbe has a message for your husband. The Rebbe wants me to give him a message. Please get the phone to him." So frantically, she pushes herself into the room, and she calls from the phone near his room. And the secretary says, "I want to speak to him." But she says again, "He's in a coma." She says, "Put the phone to his ear." So my aunt puts the phone to his ear, and as Rabbi Lipsky says the story to us, he says, "Suddenly the first thing I hear is Rabbi Chadakov, and I hear the Rebbe in the background telling me about someone that's coming to Bell Harbor. That's where he's the rabbi in the Shul of Bell Harbor. There's someone coming there that I need your help with." And suddenly he wakes up. Now, if you want to say it was a miracle, what kind of miracle? Was he anyways waking up with anesthesia? That's not the point of the story. The point of the story is that the Rebbe spoke from his heart into his ear. Daber Boznei Bincha. He spoke to him like his child into his ear. And stuff that went out of the heart pierced the heart. The Rebbe had a mission for him. He had something for him to do. And he spoke to him to his heart, and he was able to listen. That's the message of what God tells Moses. God says to Moshe, "You know why I want Pharaoh to have the 10 plagues? You know why I want you to go again? Because I want you to be able, when you have those meaningful conversations, not the casual ones, not the chit-chat, but the meaningful conversations with your children, I want you to be able to speak into their ear, words from the heart that will pierce their heart." Take this opportunity, this beautiful day and beautiful Shabbos, and every time you could, and speak to your children words